I'm Tiffany Pascal, and I welcome you to Think on These Things with Tiff. This is a podcast within my online ministry, Every Single One of Us, in which I will share inspiring messages through the wisdom of Scripture, thought-provoking discussions, personal testimonies, and prayer. Join me on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to tune in. Whether you join us live or catch the replay, it's my hope and prayer that each message will encourage and empower you to live your best life in Christ Jesus. I also want to invite you to join our community's time of prayer. It's called Effectual Fervent Prayer, and it's live weekly on Mondays at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. Before we start, be sure to subscribe to this channel to get notifications about new videos and to stay up to date on what's happening within our Every Single One of Us community. Now we're all set to think on these things with Tiff. Let's go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Think on These Things with Tiff. I'm your host, Tiffany Pascal. I'm so excited about my guest today. I have my sister friend who's an emotional coach, minister, and kingdom influencer, Sheri Thompson, with me. Welcome, Sheri.
I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited.
Yes, we are both so excited. I was thinking, and I know because Sheri and I, we met through a coaching group that we both are a part of called Finally Flow. And so I know that Sheri understands the vision of every single one of us. But for those of you who maybe are just joining the group today, I want to give you some background. Again, my name is Tiffany Pascal. I'm a minister, but really I am passionate about Christian singles and really empowering Christian singles through the Word of God to live their best lives. That is the vision that I have for this group and how every single one of us came to be. And so I'm so happy to have my sister friend on the line with me tonight. I really know that God is going to bless each and every one of you tonight. As I mentioned, she is an emotional healing coach, and I think that's so important for us as Christian singles to really be able to tap into and to glean from as those of us that are wanting to get married while we're in this, between time and living our best lives. I think it's the topic of healing is super important. And so it's so fitting to have her on tonight. And again, I feel like you all will be greatly blessed by the conversation that is going to take place on tonight. So with that, Sheri, can you tell us or tell me a little bit about your beginnings and what started you on this journey of emotional healing?
I think it was God's timing. It has been in my spirit, like majority of my life. You know how you know that there's a little bit more that like God has called you to more. Part of me being, an empath and a seer and all of that, like to feel the emotions. But there were so many things that had happened in my life that God just was revealing like a healing space for me. And I often say that, God created me to be who I needed myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Lord just opened that door and allowed me again just to be who I needed. And it just feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And tell me, in thinking about your experience as a Christian single, what has stood out to you as far as any particular areas that you struggled with?
Oh, Lord. Everything. Because again, like God, he's birthed me in the earth or me to speak to the me's in the earth. And so there has been everything. Like the Lord has trusted me with molestation. The Lord has trusted me with rape, divorce. There are so many things that I had to heal from.
Mm-hmm.
I often call, I've been gifted with the gift of acronyms. And so I say our truth moments, that trauma, rape, spaces of feeling unloved, unlovable, the tragedy and the hurt. And so all of those spaces and spaces in between, God really, I think, oftentimes people say that we're healed of things. I don't believe that we're healed of everything. I believe that the Lord allows layers. It's almost like an onion. He allows you to get to one layer at a time in order for you to get the fullness of healing. Sometimes if you rush through and you really don't allow it to come up and
Mm-hmm.
allow, like the cream of the crop, allow that thing to come up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we miss it, and sometimes we have to go back
Right.
in
That's
order
true.
for us to learn it again.
Right.
So, yeah, that's
That's true.
okay.
Okay. Um, how do you feel like the things that you were challenged with and you struggled with, what do you feel like really helped you overcome those challenges?
Only the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Those spaces where I really yielded and surrendered myself,
Mm-hmm.
that I realized that, oftentimes people say, out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're not focused on it, if you've really called yourself moving on past it, if you don't have to see the person, then you're over it.
Mm-hmm.
And avoidance is not healing. Like,
Right.
it will creep up on you.
Right.
I often tell people, like, your trauma, really, your truth moments are really making your decisions for you. And
Right.
even though you may not have seen that person for 10 to 20 years, if you've been raped, molested,
Mm-hmm.
if you've, been divorced, or whatever trauma that you've gone through, whether it's a loss, you lost a spouse, or whatever that is, if you do not deal with it, it'll come back up again. It'll show back up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so God just allows us, I always say space for grace, the grace of space, the
Mm-hmm.
space
Mm-hmm.
for grace, in order for us to really recoup what he's already placed inside of us.
Right.
That forgiveness, that space that allows us to even just to be able to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we stutter stop and we stay stuck when God has already given us the victory.
Right.
And so those things really need to be unwrapped. And I often say, it's generational wealth. When you take
Right.
care of your emotional health, it's generational wealth, just like you leaving your child, millions of dollars. That
Mm-hmm.
emotional health, it really does. It transfers into your lineage and your
Mm-hmm.
legacy.
Yep. I'm
Yeah.
totally agree with that. And I think what's important about what you're saying is oftentimes, and I can personally speak for myself, being a Christian single for as long as I have, sometimes we can be sometimes without even knowing so set on the idea of getting married that we're not looking within, and we're not looking at the work that needs to be done within ourselves, and we're not considering the importance of making sure that we have that healing for ourselves before we take that next step into marriage. And so I would say or am curious about when you were a single Christian, and I know you are now, before you got married, where did this show up for you? Like, were there instances where you were really desiring to be married and things came up and you were like, oh, wait a minute, I need to deal with that.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think that, majority of us are
Hmm.
waiting,
Hmm.
majority of us singles, even for the males,
Hmm.
if you desire to be married, that's all that you're really focused on.
Hmm.
As the time is ticking by, then you just want to fill whatever void you feel like, that marriage is going to make me whole.
Hmm.
I'm half of a whole, and not
Right.
realizing that we need to be fully whole going
Right.
into it. And
Right.
so all of us, tend to have, this dream in our heads, almost like watching Cinderella or watching, some fairy tale. And we think that it's going to be just as easy as that.
Right.
But I often say, my blessing that God has given me, the
Hmm.
healing station, that, when you're going from station to station, you're going to the next destination, you're going to be carrying those suitcases with you. And
Hmm.
so, going into a marriage, if you haven't dealt with all of the stuff, and I'm not going to
Yes.
say that, we can get it all done prior to
Hmm.
getting married. But
Hmm.
if you don't take the time to do like that initial prep work,
That's
then
good.
you're going to be going into the marriage. Really, you're sabotaging the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, we think that, like I said, the person coming in, it's going to fill the void. We're
Hmm.
suddenly not going to be lonely, or we're suddenly not going to feel all of these emotions from the lack of healing,
Hmm.
and not realizing, wait a minute, like, I really do need to take care of, because if I don't trust individuals going into the marriage, I'm still
Hmm.
going to have that lack of trust.
That's right.
If I go into the marriage, with all of the residue from being raped or being molested or being mishandled and
Hmm.
all of that, if you take that into the marriage, that's what the blueprint is for the marriage. That
Right.
is the ground floor. That is the basement of what you're trying to build from.
Right.
And I feel like, people, just as we're being active in our physical health, because, this is January. So
Right.
everybody, I'm going to join a gym, I'm going to lose
Uh-huh.
weight, all of that. If you're not just as active in your healing,
Mm-hmm.
then that is going to, like I said, transfer into your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I often say, I'm going to be very transparent. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
When I was married, I've been single for 10 years now, but prior to my divorce, I realized that um I went in broken. I went in needing healing. So
Mm-hmm.
even if there were no infidelity, even if everything was peaches and cream, even
Mm-hmm.
if he had been the perfect man,
Mm-hmm.
it still would have fallen apart because I was not healed. I went into the marriage with all of the insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
all of the rejection issues, all
Mm-hmm.
of that, low self-esteem. And
Yeah.
I never saw myself the way God saw me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the premise to going into anything is you really have to have that real established relationship with God.
Yes. Yes.
Like, you don't know how to love if you have not had real relationship with the Lord. We can't even grasp
There it
what
is.
love really, really is.
That's right.
And so all of the things that I thought I knew, and it's so funny because even this past weekend, last week we had where I live, they had a joint revival.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, they've been doing it for 30 some years. Every year, TD Jakes is our keynote speaker, and he
Mm-hmm.
teaches leadership and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, like I said, we go into this thinking that I'm going to be, that I know it all and
Mm-hmm.
I've mastered this. And I was
Mm-hmm.
telling my bestie, well, my sister, I call her my sister,
Uh-huh.
that I said, even everything that I thought I knew about God,
Yeah.
like it's just becoming more and more like, wait a minute, like
Yeah.
I really don't have a clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Like he's
understand.
revealing himself more and more,
Right.
or he's being revealed more and more to me because I'm yielding and surrendering more. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you go into a marriage and you really don't know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
you can't expect for a person to give you that extra. You can't expect for the person to fill in the gaps, because
Mm-hmm.
most of the time when you go into it like that, they don't really know who they are either,
Right.
because
Right.
we attract what we are. We
Yes,
attract
that's
who we
good.
are.
That's
So they
good.
don't know who they are. So you
Right.
got two, basically Jane Doe and John Doe coming
That's good.
together,
Yep.
trying to form a marriage, trying
Yeah.
to have children, trying to do all of those things, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just created. It's a space for chaos to me.
Mm-hmm. You've said so much, and there's so
I'm
much to.
sorry.
And no, this is so good, and there's so much to unpack in all of that you said as you were speaking. Like different things were coming to my mind, and you've touched on so many key things that I really want to break down. So one of the things that you touched on is like this notion sometimes that we have that as single people, that being married is like the cure all, like it's the solve. It's, that's the thing that's going to make you happy and whole. Where do you think that this notion comes from?
It's been passed down from generation to
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah.
Like, most of the time when we're struggling with our healing issues, it came from our mama, it came from
Mm-hmm.
our grandmother, it came from our
Mm-hmm.
grandfather. Like, that's why I say it, taking the time to emotionally heal
Yes.
is generational wealth.
Yes, it
And
is.
I don't believe, that we are cursed, because
Mm-hmm.
of course, Jesus, when he hung on the cross, like everything was taken care of on that
Right.
day.
Right.
And so I do believe that there are strongholds that have been carried from generation to generation,
Mm-hmm.
simply because people did not. I always say you're selfish if you
Mm-hmm.
don't take time to heal, and
Mm-hmm.
people have not taken time to heal. We just see ourselves as others see us, and not as God sees us.
Right.
And so, because my mother never saw herself as beautiful, my mother never saw herself as, valuable or worthy or
Right.
any of that. Those are the things that I wrestled with as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because all of the things, like, it's almost like the scripture, in Job, he's saying, wait a minute, like, you've had that hedge around him, you've removed that,
Mm-hmm.
and you remove that, and I guarantee you he'll curse you. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, like, we're like in a space of what we think is like a space of protection,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not really protection. We're being separated
Yeah.
in a way from the level and the, what is my word, it's almost like it's just God wanting to reveal, God
Right.
wanting to, it's almost like, as Oprah says, like the aha moment.
Right.
Like
Right.
God really wants us to get that,
Right.
and the only way that we can is really to just to ask him. It's
Right.
just as simple as, God, I just want you to reveal to me,
Right.
like, what are those things, because we know what our, and we call them triggers.
Mm-hmm.
We know what the little, what our triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
We know when a gentleman does this or does that, like it brings up something from
Right.
our past.
Right.
And so all of those things are, like I said, they're transferred from generation to generation. And what you might be wrestling with, your insecurity, your rejection, and all of that, it
Right.
may not have anything to do with, your experience. It
Yeah.
could, but it may not. It may
That,
be just like I said, the generational
mhm.
strongholds that are coming
Yes.
forward.
That's deep and so, so good. So thinking about that. So if we're coming into a situation where we have that going on, and then you take on top of that, I think sometimes the pressure of society sometimes, and sometimes even our loved ones and family members, if we don't have the clock ticking on ourselves, they have the clock ticking on us sometimes. Like, why aren't you married, and you have this and that going on, and why aren't you married? So sometimes we can get that from both sides. And I think so much of that is so key. And it wasn't for me until I recognized that, hey, I'm feeling a whole lot of pressure being single and not married, and like, wait, this is like really impacting like my decision making, and like what I believe about myself. And it wasn't until I allowed God to kind of break that down and shed some light on some things, and I really began to, like you said, really begin to see God and know him in a fuller way, and really begin to understand his love for me, that it clicked for me that I am enough. I am enough whether I'm single. I am enough if I'm married. Either way, I am enough. And single doesn't make me less than. And I think so many singles have found themselves in a place at one time or another where they have felt less than because they were single and by themselves. And that's why I'm so passionate about just encouraging single people and just empowering them to live their best lives, and really letting them know they are enough, being single. And if they never get married, they are enough. So thank you for that. So we've kind of touched on why healing is important. I thought it was something that I want to circle back on. As you said, I think sometimes people, okay, for those who have tapped into the fact that, okay, there's some work that I need to do on myself, and I do need to be healed before I take this next step. But I think you said that you don't necessarily have to be all the way healed, because even when you transition to marriage, there's still going to probably be some healing and things that you need to work out. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that when we go in, I think that most people these days, especially Christians, because we're talking to believers,
Mm-hmm.
that there is some sort of marital counseling that
Mm-hmm.
happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And during that marital counseling, like there are things that pop up in the conversation
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is not, okay, it's not just, oh, well, we're gonna get married and
Mm-hmm.
then we're gonna have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you come from? Where did you live? Like it's I believe that there's some in-depth conversations or in-depth questions that are
Mm-hmm.
asked. Those are, to me, is either red flags or it's the flag that tells you just to go ahead, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so there are things that pop up right in that conversation that should be like the key things that you are having, serious dialogue about
Mm-hmm.
prior to getting married.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, most of the time, when we used to get married, I mean, well, I never asked. Going into my former marriage, I never asked the question. And
Mm-hmm.
so key questions that we should be asking these days are, where is your mental health?
Yeah.
Where is, what do you have a history of mental illness in your family?
Mm-hmm.
What are your views on, and be broad, like, I mean, ask some questions that are not your norm,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to get a response to find out where someone is or where they are mentally.
Mm-hmm.
or where they are as far as their beliefs, because you could believe one thing and they not believe, the same as you. In the Bible, when it tells us that we shouldn't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Unbelievers are not just sinners. Unbelievers are those people who are not, we are not aligned in our thinking. We are not aligned in our belief system. It's one thing for you to believe, I believe in God, but do
Mm-hmm.
you believe that He is Jehovah Shalom?
Yeah.
Like, do you believe in
Right.
Jehovah Rapha? What do you? How do you look at God, or how do you view Him? Do you believe that He is your provider? Do you believe that He is, your peace? And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, especially when we go watch these award shows, we see people every day, claiming, okay, I want to thank God,
Right.
and have
Right.
no real concept of who God
Right.
is.
Right.
And so, even with that, like, you need to ask the right questions, and there is no wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
There is no question that should not be asked, especially if we're at, well, we good and grown, but
Mm-hmm.
especially, for those younger people going
Right.
into it, wanting to have children and wanting to, I mean,
Right.
what are your short term goals? What are your long term goals? Where do you see yourself 20
Right.
years from now? Do you see yourself in an RV driving across the country? Do you see
Mhm.
yourself settled in Colorado? Like, where do you see yourself? And
Right.
oftentimes we think that we can work it out later,
Mm.
or if they don't have the same views,
Mm.
we feel like I can change him.
Yes,
If
that's
I
big.
love him enough
Yep,
that
that's
I can
big.
change him, I can shift
Yeah.
him, I can cause him, to change his opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the wrong way of going into it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to, I feel like, again, we attract who we are or where we are. And if we got some broken places, that's what we're gonna get.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that that's key. It's important to ask the right questions.
So important. It's so important. And that makes me think about, I talk to my cousin a lot. She's my first cousin. She's like a sister to me, and she's married. And we talk sometimes, and she tells me like how much she feels like she romanticized marriage before she before she actually got married. And so she tells me all the time, like, Tiff, I don't want you to romanticize, this thing, because it's really, when you get on the other side of it,
Uh-huh.
it really can be eye opening in a lot of ways. And I know there's other people like me that perhaps romanticize it. Like you said, we watch the Hallmark movies, we buy into
Hmm.
these things, and we just think, oh,
Yes.
we know it's life, but part of us thinks, we buy into that fairy tale a little bit. And so I want to know, in your experience, from going from single to married, like, what were some of the biggest, aha moments for you, or things that you came to the realization, like, okay, I don't know if I expected this.
I didn't I didn't expect that it wouldn't be, that we would, at night we would go to bed and
Mhm.
all would be right with the world. I
Uh-huh.
didn't expect, for hiccups to happen, like our
Mhm.
our daughter to be suffering with mental illness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when my ex-husband and I got married, I always say, he came with an extra gift. And
Mhm.
so I don't believe in steps. That steps lead to levels. They do not lead to people. When I
Uh-huh.
love you, I love you. You my sister, my brother, my cousin.
Yes,
That is it.
that's
And
it.
so
Mhm.
I don't view her as step. But
Mhm.
he came in with a daughter, and I came in with a daughter, and then we
Mhm.
had mine, his, ours.
Mhm.
And so I did not expect that there would be, some struggles in, taking care of mental health so early. I had no clue. I had no template. I I had nothing to work with. And it's so funny because going into it, um like that was the biggest I won't say issue, but opportunity, because we went to our pastor and our pastor had no clue. Our pastor was not equipped. And
Mhm.
so they, they tell you to pray about it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
not realizing that now, we hear it more than not, that you can have, therapy and God. And
Mhm.
so, back then it was so tough, um trying to manage that space, trying to manage all of that. Like we were pretty young, and having one mind, one ours, and coming in and having different views
Mhm.
about how we were going to raise these kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just feeling like, that love was just going to conquer all.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, we have to have conversation. We've got to take time to, reason together. As the Bible says, come, let us reason
Right,
together.
right.
And that was the biggest thing. Like, when the things that you haven't planned show up, what do you
Mm.
do
That's
then? And
good.
then we
Yeah.
had a preemie, our 20-year-old. She was a preemie. And
Mhm.
so I had to stay home
Mhm.
for, I want to say I stayed home majority of, because we both work for the school system. So like majority of the second half of the school year. And so I
Mhm.
was home and he was being the breadwinner at the time, which was
Mhm.
conflict as well, because we didn't discuss finances
Mhm.
as well. And so
Mhm.
it was all of those things that really do make a difference. Like,
Mhm.
people think that, love conquers all, but it doesn't.
Mhm.
Like if you don't, take the time to say, okay, well, what would happen if, because we say in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, right? We
Mhm.
say all of
We
those
do.
things.
Yeah, people say that. Uh-huh.
But what if the worst really gets worse?
Mhm.
What if going into the marriage a year into it, that it's worse before it's better? Like, what do you
Mhm.
do?
Right.
And so we're in this space, or this age of, the divorce rate. And then there's 10 women, 10 men for every
Right.
woman.
Right.
And or 10 women for every man.
Mhm.
And so it's all of these other things, and not realizing, wait a minute, like if you go into a marriage immature,
Mhm.
because that's what it is. If you go into the marriage immature,
Mhm.
then a lot of chaos, a lot of things can happen.
Mhm.
And it doesn't just destroy the marriage. Sometimes it destroys pieces of you as well.
Ooh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. That's something there. And that's deep. And it makes me, it's kind of like a perfect segue into another question that I have. Like when you are in a marriage and you come across situations where you and your spouse are seeing things differently, how do you navigate that?
I think that for the most part, you should have wise counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And the counsel could be therapy, the counsel could be your pastor. I think that most times when we join churches, like girl, I got so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes we are a part of ministries that are a part of our lineage, or my grandmama went to this church, and my great grandmama went to this church, and that's why we go to this church.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that they don't have the resources, they're not equipped, as I said before. And so um that wise counsel, you got to make sure that you have some sure enough people
Mm-hmm.
that can counsel you in
Mm-hmm.
whatever area, that
Mm-hmm.
they don't just tell you just to run and pray, because life is real.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not, and it's not, canceling out the greatness of God and the goodness of God.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have some practical things. Like if my husband is constantly leaving the toilet seat up,
Mm-hmm.
or my husband doesn't take care of, he drops his clothes everywhere, and I constantly feel like I'm a maid. Like, wait a minute, am I gonna pray about that? Like, what do I do with that? Like, do
Mm-hmm.
I waste God's time asking him, who gonna wash dishes tonight?
Right.
Like, do I waste God's time with any
Mm-hmm.
of that? That's not what we do.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that we need to make sure that we have some staple people, just
Yeah.
like we have a good community.
Mm-hmm.
I have you, like we have a good community,
Right.
but we should have that within our marriage. You should have people that that you trust,
There you go. That you trust.
that you trust,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
with guidance and
Mm-hmm.
with wisdom. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people know a whole lot, but they ain't rock. They're not wise. Sometimes you
Mm.
don't read a book, but you don't really know it unless you walking through
That's so
it. And
true.
so
Yep.
I think that, going into my, like, I didn't have it. Like I had a good pastor. Like I loved my pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, like, his wife was involved. It was a lot, which caused my ex to shut down all the time because he was like, she minding our business.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it was so much
Yeah.
all the time
Right.
that we didn't have a reasoning together. We did
Mm-hmm.
not. And
Mm-hmm.
I went into it on the heels of a relationship that
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't healed from,
Mm-hmm.
and I had all of this other truth that was
Mm-hmm.
in my luggage.
Right.
And
Right.
so going into it, I remember, you might not remember. I don't know how saved you are, but back in the day, like the
Uh-huh.
song was it was by Deborah Cox, Nobody's Supposed to Be Here.
I remember the song.
And
Yep.
girl, I would play that song and I said, listen, like, don't be playing with me. Like, nobody's supposed to be here. Cause
Right.
I had planned on getting into another relationship.
Right.
But but and I said it multiple times, like,
Uh-huh.
do if you're not ready for this, then leave me alone.
Right.
But most of the time, like, because for one, sometimes we are drawn to someone and you're attracted, whether it's sexually, physically, and all of that, and you think that you're ready for
Uh-huh.
all that comes with that person.
Right.
And you're not.
Yeah.
And you're not.
Yeah.
You're not.
Right. So it would behoove us not to be in a rush whatsoever. There's
Especially now.
especially now, and there's preparation to this, and I think sometimes again, like people lose sight of the preparation that really should take place before we take that step. Thinking about marriage to my best friend's been married like 25 years, and I know that I am a trusted person that she talks to, but even with that, I know that there are certain things that she doesn't talk to me about, that she shouldn't. So like I want to, you mentioned that like we should have wise counsel, but talk to me about like being careful about what you share and why that's important, why you can't share everything with everyone.
Mm-hmm. And that was something that I had to learn. And now I know that when God sends him, because
Yeah.
God never sent him before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put that out there, because
Okay.
oftentimes we think that we've found something, and I was stuck in the mentality of, in the word when he says, "He that findeth the wife findeth the good
Yes.
thing,
Yep.
and obtains favor from the Lord." So
Mhm.
when he chooses me, then that is supposed to be who God sent. And
Uh-huh.
I think that there has to be agreement even within you
Yeah.
that this is exactly who God
Right.
sends, because not everybody we're not in a space of, like I said, spiritual maturity.
Right.
And so what you may feel may be just something, from your loins, and may not be that,
Talk about it.
God sent
Talk about talk about it. Okay.
that God sent
Right.
anyway.
Right.
But I will be and see, there I go. Because when I start talking, girl, I forget the question. Give me the
So
question again.
so now I was asking why it's okay. I was asking, why do we need to be choosy about who we talk to and what we say when we talk to people?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And so sharing
Yes.
too much.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful, even when in the word, when it tells you the marital bed is undefiled.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are certain things that you should not share, and that's why you should have a safe community, someone.
Mm-hmm.
And my safe, here we go with my acronyms again.
Mm-hmm.
If we're spiritually accountable for each other.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that's not everybody. Everybody is not a good accountability partner. Everybody is not that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to realize, wait a minute, like, what are, how far can I go with sharing? And you should have one trusted friend, maybe two trusted friends. That's not everybody in your family. That's not all your sisters. That's not all your cousins. That's not your mama, your daddy, all of those other people. Because once you bring those people in, those people are going to have opinions about how you move forward.
Wow.
Some people may say, oh, wait a minute, I think you should leave him. I think you should leave her. I think this is too much. How much money does he have? All of that, they lose their job. Like, some people, they get the family involved. And then once you have forgiven a person, or you're ready to move
there it
on,
is. There
the
it
family's
is.
holding grudges.
Yep.
And that's because you should have never shared it. It's just as sacred as the bed being
Yep.
undefiled.
Yep.
And so you got to know who you can trust.
Yep.
And that's not everybody.
That's so good.
You know how people say, and what's the phrase when people say, you know, if you're talking to everybody about everything, then it really most likely it's not the problem is not them. The problem is you,
Uh-huh.
because you're needing to talk to all these different people.
Right.
And so you got to realize that if you can't come and reason together, it's just like in the Bible when it tells you if you got an ought against your brother and sister, right? You're supposed to go to them.
You're supposed to go
And
to
then
them.
if you
Yep.
can't reason with them, then you bring somebody else in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The initial conversation you should have with your spouse
is with the person. Yep.
and then if you cannot reason together,
Yep.
then you go ahead and you get somebody else to
Mm-hmm.
come in and mediate, or be and it has to be a neutral person.
Yes.
It cannot be somebody who, oh, she was my friend. Even if your therapist has been your therapist for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
that therapist cannot be somebody who comes in because that therapist already knows you.
That's
and
right.
doesn't know him.
That's right. Yep. That's
and
important.
So at some point we can't be impartial.
Right. Right.
And so you got to make sure of who you expose your dirty laundry to.
So good.
Because you wouldn't, it's just like, you know, you walking around your house. Would you walk around your house in your panties and your bra in front of everybody?
You would not.
You wouldn't.
You
wouldn't be having that. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I'm saying your undergarments. Would you do that in front of everybody? No,
you would not.
So some things are not things that should be exposed to everybody.
Right.
Shouldn't be exposed because people are going to run and tell that. And then that's going to cause more, which is what happened with my ex. As I said, you know, when I talked to he always felt like they sided with me and they talked to, well, he was wrong.
Okay.
But he felt like, you know, they sided with me all the time, that there was no neutral person. And, you know, I put on my pants just like he does. He can't tell me what to do in my marriage. And so that just caused problems. And then when his wife got involved, like it just caused problems.
Yeah.
And so I think that we cannot go into anything being haphazard about it.
Right.
And not realizing that, again, we're just going back to the immaturity. Like, are we really ready? Like a lot of us think we're ready and we're not. We're not.
That's so good.
It took us to get good and wrong to realize when we're ready.
Come on now. That's so good. I heard somebody say, you know, the other day, like, you know, even to be a beautician, you got to get a license for that. You know what I'm saying? To be doctors and things like that, you got to be educated and get a license for that. And I don't think a lot of people look at marriage like, hey, that's a big thing. There should be some preparation that you have before you go into that. You should, you know, be knowledgeable about certain things and have taken the time to get counseling and educate yourself about certain things before taking such a major step. And so I thought that was really good. So wrapping up here a little bit, I want to, you briefly touched on like when you know the person is sent by God. When do you feel personally, in your experience, when do you feel like you know when a person is sent by God versus a person that's a counterfeit?
I believe that God will show you, because in times past I thought I knew, and I didn't know. There was people that I would have chosen based on looks, based on attraction, based on commonality, all of those things. And I believe that again, as I was going back to that, you know, he that findeth the wife findeth a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Yes. I have been told so many times, you my wife, you my wife, you my wife, without any backing, without any, you know, there was inconsistency, there was insecurity, there was all kinds of stuff, and I'm not going backwards. So if if you can't meet me where I am, then no, you're not him as well. There you go. And if you are not a person that I feel like meshes with my assignment, that's I believe that's you know what God has joined together. Yep. It literally joins together, like our visions, our purpose, all of that aligns to the will of God for our lives, right? Yeah. And so I don't believe, you know, that it's just some random person. It's a person that fits almost like a puzzle piece. Yes. And so I am that's why I'm very careful in my steps, because if it feels like this, it may not be.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
because it's not about a feeling.
Yeah.
It's about a knowing.
It's about a knowing. Yep.
It's about a
It's
knowing.
about a
And
knowing. Yep.
oftentimes, because we get caught up in that emotional
Mm-hmm.
state, because it's easy to become connected with someone emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so hard. And, when we talk about soul ties and all of
Yes.
that,
Yes.
because you have already become attached.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a knowing.
Yes.
And then I think that you should pause and take some time apart
Mm-hmm.
and see, okay, do I miss this person? Do they miss me? Like, how does that thing open up?
Mm-hmm.
What does it feel like?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the truth about
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yes. That's good.
Because sometimes we look at things and it feels a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
but the truth is this joker ain't. He ain't.
Right.
And
That's so
so
good. Yep.
we have to be mindful. And as I was saying before, at our age, because we
Mm-hmm.
50, y'all, we
We
50.
are 50.
At our we good and grown. At
Yeah.
our age, what we wanted when we were 20
Right.
is not what we want when we're 50.
That's so true. That's so true.
And all of the things that drew us when we were 20 and all of the things that we thought, the white picket fence and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, this life is a little bit different. We've experienced COVID.
Yeah.
We've experienced loss. We've experienced so many things,
Mm-hmm.
sickness and all of that who we were is not who we are.
Right. Right.
And so that it has to be a leveling up for me.
Yeah.
And that's not, most of the time when you say that, people think about, it's a gold digger. You just want what? Nah, I just know that God has created me greater.
There you go.
And
There you
I
go.
know that where I'm going is
Right.
greater.
Yep.
And so I'm not going to settle in being mediocre.
Right.
When I know that the world out there needs more.
Right.
And so,
That's good.
yeah. So
That is
that's
very
the
good.
real power couple.
Yeah.
It's not about Jay-Z, Beyonce, all the people that y'all think is the power
There you
couple.
go.
It's about the power.
There you
couple.
go. That is so good. And I know too, I always had kind of this mindset that, okay, I just he needs to be a Christian. Like, okay, like that was the biggest thing for me. And boy, have I found out, and I'm sure you have found this out too. Hey, just because you're a Christian and they're a Christian does not mean that that's the person for you. Like, I really had to learn about, it's not just about being equally yoked as you two being Christians. Like, you have to be equally yoked beyond just that. To your point, like, does this person match my assignment? Can they elevate me? Can I elevate them? Like, do we fit? It's so much more than just just that thing. So I wanted to touch on that too, because I discovered that.
And then people's relationship with the Lord is something that's totally different, because they could be, if you're not a drinker, then you shouldn't be, there are so many people that do so many different things.
Yeah.
And I ain't gonna touch on that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many people that, we do not, it's just like the different faiths, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are people that are different denominations,
Mm-hmm.
Methodists and Baptists and all of that, people do different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to make sure that it matches
That's true.
where you are and what you're doing. Because like I said, people throw Christian around all the time.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that they really are connected and really have a real relationship. It may be that they just go to church on Sunday or go to church on Easter. True. And they all, I know God.
Yes.
I've heard that so many times.
Yes. Yep.
I know God.
Yep.
And or they say, you do too much. Like, you go to church too much. One guy who was really into me, God, let me tell you, had it going on, all of that, drove a nice car, all of that. Yeah. He said, you go to church too much. I go to church too. Like, I'm okay with you going to church, but we don't gotta go to church every Sunday. And we don't have to do, oh no, we are not a match made in heaven. We are not. Yeah. And so we got to be mindful to not be desperate in this day. And when there is 10 women for every man, especially as Christian women, like, you go to church, he a drummer, he a musician, he's this, he's that, he's the pastor. And so you suddenly, okay, wait a minute, like, that must, that's going to be my husband because he's in the house. And just because he's a man of God doesn't mean he's your man of God. There you go. And there you have it. There you have it. There's something that comes to my mind, and I was talking about being equally yoked with a person. What if somebody is showing interest in you and
you being the powerful woman of God that you are, they show interest, but you discover that this person is not on like the same level as you spiritually, or not as spiritually mature. Do you think that that immediately disqualifies the person, or how do you feel about that?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Because right now, I think you need to match it. Right now,
Okay.
I think that if I am waiting for him to catch up to that space, then that
Mm,
means I will have a stalling. And
mm,
we don't need any more stutter stops. Like, we got too much work to do.
yeah.
And that's not, disqualifying. I'm just saying, for me,
Yeah.
I need somebody who is gonna match where I am. I think, especially, and even their belief. Like, it's just like, in the word, the stories in the Bible where, the blind man was healed, or the man at the pool of Bethesda, like, all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have seen what you have seen, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And so, because, I felt that thing.
Mm,
You can't, the level that I have seen God manifest in my life, I can't unsee it. I can't
mm,
unknow it.
right.
And I can't go backwards.
Yeah.
And so, if you have to lead somebody to it constantly, and
Mm,
I, especially in my assignment, I don't want to be a life coach at home.
ooh.
I don't want to be, and not that we
Wow.
aren't growing, and not
Right.
that we aren't, we all have spaces to learn. Like,
Right.
I don't know it all. Like I just told you, like,
Mm,
God is just, revealing himself so much to me. I'm like, even what I thought I knew, I don't know. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to have to go backwards, and I don't want to have to nurse you like a baby,
mm-hmm.
to get you to, get to the meat stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, um, that's just for
Yeah.
me.
That's good.
I don't believe that he wants us to go backwards.
Okay.
I don't believe
That's
that.
really good. That's
The
really good.
lady was turned into a pillar of salt,
Or
and
looking
she
back,
turned
did
back.
she not? Did she not? Okay. Okay. We're just saying. We're just saying. Okay. All right. So final words. What would be the final words that you would tell a Christian single that desires to be married, that's kind of in that waiting stage and doing life? What do you think is the key things for that person to kind of keep in mind or to be
I
mindful?
think you need to be focused on what God has called you to do.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
believe that, when we go out searching and looking,
Yeah.
you can find a whole lot, but that doesn't mean that that's what God has ordained for your life. So
Right.
if you're working on healing, and working on your assignment, and working on movement,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, then, the word tells us, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and
Mm-hmm.
all these things shall be added unto you. God knows what all those things
That's
are.
so good.
And
That's so.
so I think that we need to be in a space that we're not, our timing is not his timing.
Right.
And
Mhm.
that's why, a lot of singles get tired of waiting and not realizing, like, that he's prepping
Mhm.
that person just as much as he's prepping you in this space.
Mhm.
So allow God's timing
Mhm.
to be his timing. Now, I didn't think that I would be waiting 10 years.
Mhm.
To be very transparent, like, I've been celibate for 10 years. I didn't think that
Mhm.
God would be making me wait
Uh-huh.
for 10 long, long,
10,
long,
10
long, long
years. You
years.
said you said 10
But
years? Okay.
10 long,
Okay.
long, 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 long
Okay.
years.
Oh.
But I will tell you, the levels and the growth
Mhm.
that I thought initially, when I started this process, it was just that I wanted to wait.
Yeah.
I just wanted to wait because I had been molested at 4 and 9 and raped at 16 and 19. Like, I wanted to close some doors. I wanted to really figure out the whys, because it's easy. It's easy to fall in somebody's bed. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it
easy
is.
to do those
It
things.
is.
And I have daughters. And so
Mhm.
I wanted to create something different. And then as time went on, I was like, wait a minute, like, there are a lot, I don't want to break everything open tonight, but there are a lot of things that people think that, okay, well, I can just do this in the
Right.
meantime. If you masturbating in the meantime, you ain't waiting. Go ahead and get you some. So all of those, those things,
Uh-huh.
10 years of waiting,
Right.
now I know quality instead
Yes.
of quantity.
That is so
And
good.
so I
That's
believe
good.
that I'm worth it, and I
Yeah.
believe that he's worth it.
Yes.
It's not even that, oh, girl, it is
Yeah.
about me. No, I believe that he was worth the wait,
Come on.
and I believe that
Come
I'm
on.
worth the wait.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about rushing.
No.
When you get that microwave food, it's different than when you cooking Thanksgiving
There you
and all
go.
of those food is all the
Come
seasoning and
on.
stuff get in
And,
there.
and it
It
takes
it tastes a
time.
little it tastes a
Yeah.
little bit different, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
And
does.
so, I think that when you're
That's so
willing
good.
to wait and you're willing to put God first,
Yes.
um,
That's so good.
that he will bring what
That's
he
so good.
has created you for and
Yeah.
created them for you. Like,
Yeah.
I know we're supposed to be the rib. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But even in that, like that, God knows who that person is. So I
Right.
don't want to rush it. Because
Right.
sometimes you rush it, that cake flattens out
Yeah.
when you're doing too much. I
Right.
don't want
Right.
to do too much.
That is
I'm
so
done
good.
doing too much.
And let me tell you, that resonates so much with me. And my life has bore witness to what you just said. Like I've experienced life when I had God off center and my focus was just marriage, marriage, marriage. And I know that there was never more of a time that I felt more desperate when I had God out of his proper place. I had things misaligned in my life. I had lost sight of my purpose and really who didn't know who I was, didn't half love myself, let alone value myself. And
Yeah.
like I just remember how desperate I felt and just how distraught I felt because I didn't have anybody else. Now, on the flip side of that, because I think we've all been there, done that at some point. On the flip side of that, I'm looking at where I am now that I've got back in touch with my purpose, that God really, showed me and I fully accepted and embraced his love for me. Like when you tap back into God's purpose and you put him first, it puts things into their proper place and perspective, and it dries out that desperation in you because you have purpose. You know what I'm saying? You have God back in his proper place in your life and you're so fulfilled in him and in your purpose. It drives out the desperation and the loneliness that you can sometimes feel, when you put God in his proper place. To your point, like our times are in his hands. He knows when we're ready, even when sometimes we think we are. We're not really all the times that we really think that we are. And so, even myself, just even knowing you and just being a part of my coaching group has really helped me to be more conscious of the places that I've been healed and yet need to be healed in.
Yeah.
And so it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. I think for us all, but I think just being conscious enough to realize that we need healing and then taking accountability to do something about it is huge. And
Yeah.
so we've touched on that part. So lastly, what would you say to people that are newly engaged about to get married? What would be your biggest tip for them or takeaway?
I would say in the beginning, like, it's almost, when he first put the ring on your finger, like you get all giddy, you get all
Mm-hmm.
happy, you are planning your wedding and
Mm-hmm.
you get excited about the wedding
Mm-hmm.
and you forget about marriage. There
Mm-hmm.
is a big
Wow.
um there's
Wow.
a big difference in that wedding day and the
Mm-hmm.
actual marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think more prep work needs to go into
Mm-hmm.
preparing for marriage, preparing to be a wife, preparing to be a husband,
Mm-hmm.
rather than preparing, your guest list, preparing your menu.
That's key.
Because after that day, like you're gonna have to live, and life
Yep.
is gonna hit you
Yep.
from all directions. You don't know in this day, especially in this day, you don't know when illness is going to come. You don't know when death is going to come. You don't know, how life, miscarriage and all of those things. Like I lost 4 children before I had my beautiful my daughters and
Mm-hmm.
my 20-year-old, my 24-year-old. Like I had lost 4 children, went into labor early. I had what was called an incompetent service. I thought, we have this a blueprint, or we have this list that we think it's gonna flow.
Mm-hmm.
This is how life is gonna be, and it may not end up
Mm-hmm.
that way.
That's good.
And so you have to be open
Mm-hmm.
to what God allows, because your specific story is just that, your specific story. And so don't rush into it. Don't, be checking the time, down low. Wait a minute. We've been going together for 6 months. Like it's time to get married.
Right, right,
Don't rush into it.
right,
Take
right.
time and ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
There, ask the right questions. There is no, stupid question.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to ask all of the right things. And then if you decide, okay, this is, someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with, then you move forward.
Right.
Make sure that you get some counseling. Make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you have wise counsel.
Mm-hmm.
Don't don't rush into it just
Right.
because y'all look good together on Instagram. Don't rush into it because that that picture, oh, we look cute together. You got to make sure that it's going to be something that is going to have some longevity to it,
Woo,
because there's a legacy that's being created.
woo, that's good. Ooh, that's good. And I could go on and on with you, sis, just listening to you because you're dropping gems. You're dropping gems for us all. So, but I thank you so much again. And I'm so delighted that you were able to join me tonight. And I know that just everything that you've touched on is going to greatly bless everyone who listens to this message tonight. So thank you so very much. Before we close out, I do want you to tell everybody how they can be in touch with you on social media.
You can connect with me. Everything is the Healing Station 415. So on Facebook, I have the Healing Station 415 page on Facebook. It's on Instagram. My website is www.thehealingstation415.com. My Gmail account, the Healing Station
All right.
415.
Okay.
And so, I do workshops as well as I'm a emotional healing coach. So I do private individual counseling as well as group counseling as well.
Thank you so much for that. And so, before we end, I do want to remind everybody that I have effectual fervent prayer every Monday at 6 a.m. Live in the group. So, if you're up that early and want to join, please join me in prayer again every Monday at 6 a.m. Big thanks in advance for those who will watch the replay. And until we meet again, God bless you all. And thank you so much for watching.